Hello everyone, this is Steven Shinder Reviews in video form, and I'm here to talk about Alien Romulus, beginning with non-spoiler thoughts, and then I think most of the video will probably be spoiler thoughts, because I feel like I really need to talk about them to explain how much I like the movie. So, to give you an idea, the original Alien film, I think I consider the best one, probably. I'd give that one an 8, which I know some people I think is sacrilege, or like, oh, why don't you give it a 9 or a 10? And look, it does a great job being creepy and, intense, and the pacing. I like the slow burn aspect of it, although there are times where it does test my patience a little bit if I'm to sit through it. So I feel pretty good about 8 out of 10 for the original Alien. Now, Alien Romulus takes place 20 years after the original, and I think 30 years and some change before Aliens. And I think I would give Alien Romulus a 7 out of 10. To me, it's fine overall. I might have considered it better than fine if it had omitted a certain element of nostalgia that I guess they really felt like they needed to inject into the film. Like if that particular thing, which actually happens early on, had just been omitted, then I might have given this a higher score, maybe even close to an 8, like around there even. But I did think if you brush that aside, you can admire the tension of it, and the cinematography is really incredible. It really is. Like, it just, it blows my mind. And I think it's well paced, and I like the way that it plays with science. So I thought that this film had some creative bits more so than I was expecting. Because going into this, I was expecting a movie that was just a fan service movie. And while there are elements of that, it wasn't as much as I was expecting. There are just a couple things that took me out of the film whenever they happened and broke my immersion. But around all those things, like for the most part, yeah, like looking back at this movie, I think it's really enjoyable. In the moment of watching it in the theater, I was trying to piece together really how much I was enjoying it, if at all, because of the element that kept, it was basically a cloud over my head, and but I had to like see through that cloud, that fog or whatever, to see the bits that I was really appreciating about the film. And out of the cast, I think David Johnson is the real MVP. A bit more about him when I get into the spoilers, but he did a great job, very believable. Um, and there's a moment that was really disgusting, uh, and terrifying in the film. And again, I'll get that in the spoilers. But yeah, I thought this film was fine. I am glad that I went out to go see it, and yeah, it's pretty enjoyable. But again, there's the element that was kind of taking me out of it. So I guess with that, I'll go into the spoilers in a moment. But just gonna say real quick that I think that this fits really well with the entire Alien film series. It fits quite nicely, and but you don't need to do a deep dive of the Alien film series beforehand. There are nods and connections and homages here and there, but if you've only seen the original Alien film, like right before this, and you're pretty good. So now, with that, I'll get into the spoilers of this film. Okay, so the thing that pretty much got spoiled for me, because of my social feeds, before going into this film, and it was something that I kind of predicted would happen in the days leading up to it, was that this film did the thing of bringing back a dead actor, and that actor is Ian Holm, who played Ash the android in the original Alien film. And I'm really baffled by this decision. Um, when he showed up on screen, at first it was like a jump scare, and then they show him from the back and then from afar, and then I'm like, okay, if they're only showing him from afar, maybe I can get behind this. But they made a point to keep showing close-ups of his face, and they didn't look that like realistic. And yeah, I know it's an android, and to some maybe it adds to the unsettling nature of that pretty well, but I just don't get the decision behind doing this. Like, maybe, there's that idea of, oh, give Ian Holm one last performance in this franchise. Maybe there was a noble intent, but in practice, I just don't get it. Like, why did it need to be Ian Holm playing this android character whose name is Rook? It's not even the same android Ash. It's not even the same spacecraft. It's not even the same year. It could just have been a different android. I know that some people have been saying, oh, it should have been Michael Fassbender from the prequels that took place decades before Alien, but I think they should have gone with a new actor slash character. Well, it is a different character. His name is Rook, but yeah, go with a different actor. I suppose I could have even had David Johnson play another android character here. Yeah, he plays Andy, the android, who's part of this group with Rain and her crew, and again, David Johnson does a great job as Andy. I kind of figured that he was an android right when he showed up and was being naive, almost being scammed, and but going back to the Ian Holm thing, I'll get back to Andy in a moment. But yeah, I suppose they could have done a twin android thing, kind of feed into the Romulus and Remus of it all. But maybe that would have been too much like Alien Covenant. Maybe they would have wanted to avoid that. So I'm leaning toward they should have just gone with a new actor playing this android Rook, and they couldn't resist reusing the "You have my sympathies" line, which I didn't really notice initially, but I had to be reminded of it after the fact. Um, so yeah, I just don't get it. Like, were people in their seats, like, I don't know, giddy and full of excitement when they saw their favorite android from the original Alien, but it's actually a different android named Rook. Like, were people like clamoring for this? It was really hard to tell in the theater I was in. I didn't really hear anyone clapping when Rook showed up and it was Ian Holm's face. And again, Ian Holm was a fantastic actor. Not taking away from him, of course, but the practice of doing this sort of thing, and it's I think films need to stop doing this. And people make the Rogue One comparison, of course. Although with that took place the same year as A New Hope and whatnot, but there's definitely a discussion there. But with Alien Romulus, it feels a bit more removed, and so it's like, why even include this? So whenever it cut back to Rook's face, it just kept taking me out of the movie. There'd be tension, 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 and oh, Ian Holm face. Oh gosh, oh yeah, I remember I'm watching a movie. You know, and so I really wish they'd done something different here. But you know, but getting back to Andy, the android. Um, oh, I guess I just realized why he's called Andy. It's short for Android. Okay. um, yeah, David Johnson did a great job depicting him. The naivety of a robotic character who is not street smart. I guess you can say, but he's very helpful. And then the chip gets put in him and reboots his programming, his prime directive, and he acts very different with this new directive, and like still like an android, but his way of speaking changes a bit, and yeah, he really sold it. Really was believable in that he underwent a change in his programming, and so total props to him. And uh, there was there was a moment where I wondered if they were trying to say something, in terms of social issues. There was a moment where one of the characters finds Rook's android body, and Andy is accompanying the character, and when it's realized that Rook is an android, the guy is like, "Oh, I almost thought it was a person." And so in that moment, I wondered, because Andy looks like a black man, he's an android who resembles a black man. I wondered in that moment if the film was going to say something about racism, um, but that never really came back. And I kind of wonder if there was ever a thread that was going to touch on that some more, or if it was maybe cut out. And this is speculation, of course, or if this was just a coincidence, in which case I kind of don't know how one would include this and not realize that it might seem like it's about to say something, talk about issues regarding racism, but yeah, it just like didn't really touch on that, so it was kind of weird, throwing in that line specifically, but yeah, it just basically was just a thriller movie, an alien thriller movie. There was a bit that it had to say. I would because I feel like it does touch upon the bad decisions that humankind makes and like the arrogance of humanity. There's this mention of how humans are trying to colonize places, but they're not strong enough to survive in space, and so you have this thing, the Prometheus, the black goo. They do tie that back to Prometheus. It's named after that, and basically, this idea of trying to perfect humanity and make it stronger. And it's like, should people really be trying this sort of thing? These sorts of experiments with this particular black goo. I feel like there is a little bit, at least, that the film is trying to say, but for the most part, it's like a thriller film. But I do appreciate that connection to Prometheus, because going into this film, we kind of got the vibe that this would be ignoring the prequel films. The Alien prequel films are strange to me, and that Prometheus, while it did have clunky character decisions, I kind of really admire the big swings it took in trying to tell a creation myth that has a tenuous connection to Alien, and is focusing on these space jockeys or engineers or whatever they're called, the big humanoids. And for 5 years, I was waiting for Covenant to explore those people some more, but it went completely the other direction and was more like weird in that it was good as an Alien movie, but not really good as a Prometheus sequel. So, and then there never got to be a third part of that prequel trilogy. So it felt like Romulus was kind of replacing that. But I do like that there's this compromise that ties back to the prequel lore. And there is also another connection to, Prometheus. This black goo, it's supposed to supposedly make a human stronger, from what I remember. One of the characters, Kay, she is pregnant. And I don't like when films use pregnancy to as a crutch, as something to up the ante for some scares. So I was really going back and forth on how I would feel about all this. But Kay eventually ends up injecting herself with the Prometheus strain. I think that's what it was called, but it ends up affecting the baby, and she gives birth to it, and it grows into this tall, pale humanoid, and it looks like a mix between the xenomorph and the um, the engineer from, or space jockey, whatever you want to call it, from Prometheus. I guess there's some debate on whether the space jockey is those people or whether it's the thing at the beginning of the original Alien, whether or not they're the same things or if one imitates the other, but I think you get what I'm saying. So, and this also felt very reminiscent of Alien Resurrection, although apparently that was a coincidence. The director's son had to remind him after watching the movie that it was kind of like that, so that was a coincidence. But I do kind of like how it unintentionally sort of unites the Alien film series in that way. And this tall creature, I feel like maybe if it were in stop motion, it would have been a little bit more unsettling, but it was very unsettling as it was. And, it fed by eating its mother. So kind of taking the story of, you know, Romulus and Remus and the wolf kind of to the extreme. The wolf raised them, but yeah, this newborn baby, this which became this huge monster thing, like ate its mom, and so it becomes the final antagonist, basically. And of course, there are like other xenomorphs in this, and I do like that they used gravity as a way to fight them. They turn off the gravity and then, shooting at these aliens, and then they have to worry about the acid that is in the air, the acidic blood. I thought that was a cool obstacle. I did not like when Andy, once he regained his original programming, I do not like how, he's trying to save Rain, and he shoots one of the aliens, and he says, "Get away from her." And in that moment, I'm like, "Oh, okay. If he didn't finish the line, so I can forgive this." So there's a pause, and then he says, "You," he says a B word, and then out loud in the theater, I'm like, "Damn it!" Like it felt like such a cringe-worthy moment to me. I did hear a few giggles in the theater, but it just felt so cringe to me the way that they reused that line from Aliens. So yeah, my main gripes are that line and the rook of it all. Those particular nostalgia things, like I really feel took me out of the film. But without those, maybe I would have enjoyed this a bit more, and I wouldn't have been debating back and forth during this first viewing whether or not I actually like the film. I do wonder if, when I eventually rewatch it sometime down the line, if maybe it'll improve a little bit for me. Like maybe it could get up to a 7.5 or so. But I think at the moment, I'm going to stick with the 7 and maybe 7.25. I don't know. Like the movie overall is fine to me. Rain gets away, and it's the cryo sleep thing, and you kind of wonder where she's gonna end up. But I also don't feel like a sequel to this is completely necessary. I kind of like the mystery. You can keep that intact in terms of her fate, and that might be ironic coming from me, someone who still wants closure from Covenant, which left stuff dangling. But looking back at the older Alien movies, in hindsight, I kind of wonder if maybe each one could have just been an anthology film, instead of following Ripley in Aliens, or, if you're watching Alien 3 and you're disappointed in the deaths of a couple familiar characters um, at certain points in that film. So and resurrection, basically jumping through hoops to bring a character back. It's I do kind of wonder if the Alien films should have just been an anthology film series, like not the same characters, but you still get the aliens in each one. But it is what it is. I'm very curious to see how the TV show Alien Earth ends up being. Apparently, this takes place around the time that Prometheus is set, although I believe it's ignoring those prequel films. I'm going to be real curious to see if it outright contradicts those films or just does its own thing and still kind of fits but doesn't feel like mentioning those films. Like if you'll have to like kind of squint maybe to make them fit. But Noah Hawley is working on that. I really loved the show Legion. He worked on that. It's one of the best live action Marvel shows, in my opinion. It's a surrealist masterpiece. Um, and I also loved Fargo season one. I don't remember if he worked on the other seasons as well, but season one is definitely my favorite of the show. But yeah, amongst Fede Alvarez's films that I've seen, I'd put Romulus below Don't Breathe, which was maybe an 8, and also below Evil Dead 2013, which might be a 8.5, maybe even a 9. I was very impressed with that remake. So yeah, I'd rank this below those particular efforts, but I still think it had some really neat ideas, and it definitely seems to have revitalized the franchise, at least to an extent. All over my feed, everyone's talking about the Alien films and reevaluating the prequel films and ranking the films, and that's something that happens with these franchises. They put out a new one, and it makes people reevaluate and revisit some of the older ones. So it makes for a fascinating discussion. But yeah, that's pretty much it for my thoughts on Alien Romulus. I'm not sure what the next thing I might review on here will be. I kind of took a break. One of the weeks was basically a vacation, which was very much needed. But yeah, I'm sure I'll be around, and if you're subscribed, you'll be able to keep up with whatever else I end up putting out on this channel. So that's it. And everyone, thanks for tuning in to this review of Alien Romulus.